and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on.
So maybe before we get to the meat of the conversation, which is kind of a horrifying way of putting it, but like the pig meat of the conversation, we can just say that we can just plug our Patreon and our other social media. We got Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and well, the Facebook one got taken down because apparently the person with the first name Žižek and the last name and so on didn't really fit the criteria for being a real person, so they took down the group. But I'm going to try and get it back up again. Anything else you guys want to mention?
Well, I think we realized most of the way through the episode that this is going to turn into an ongoing series. So if you guys want to hear the whole thing, we're probably going to be splitting it between the Patreon and the public platform. So join up if you want to hear the whole thing.
Oh, and also if you have any we have a Discord as well. So if you have any suggestions as to episodes you'd like to see, topics you want us to talk about, articles or books you think we should read, that's a good place to do it.
Rock and roll.
Which is we've conveniently put behind the paywall.
Yeah.
if you want the access.
Yeah. All right, guys, we'll roll the tape, eh?
Roll it.
Yeah.
I will deal here with the prospect of so-called post-humanity opened up by a direct link between our brain and a digital machine. What is popularly called by some people like Elon Musk, Neuralink. My premise is that one should resist the temptation to proclaim the prospect of a wired brain an illusion, something that we are still far from and that cannot really be actualized. I think that in spite of all simplifications and exaggerations in the public media, something is going on in this domain, and I will limit myself to questioning the philosophical implications and consequences of this prospect.
Okay, but here we are. It's fucking Žižek and so on. This is Jacob right here.
Wow, you started it. Nice.
Yeah, I was trying to break the mold.
Switching it up on me.
Yeah, so this is Jacob.
Hi, it's Will.
I'm Peter. Hello.
Hey, boys.
Hey, guys.
How we all doing?
And what are we talking about today?
It's been a minute, but we pulled through.
We pulled through.
Yeah, at the top of the episode, I want to provide Žižek and so on's first ever trigger warning. I want to provide a trigger warning to anyone who's insulted at the mere negative mention of Elon Musk. I know that he stands as a kind of like fetishistic object for a vast army of internet dorks, but we just wanna say at the top of the episode, this is not a pro Elon Musk podcast. Just laying
Well,
that
you pointed out before, Peter, that Elon Musk is like Beyonce for men.
Yeah, like any criticism is off the table and will immediately be met by just direct anger, really.
It's like whoa, man! You don't like South Africans? You don't like wealthy sons of emerald mine owners?
who have never invented anything in their lives. I mean, I haven't, but his whole claim to fame is.
Neither have I. I can't speak to that. But what I want to know is, like, is he actually the one doing any of the technological developments behind
Absolutely
Tesla?
Absolutely not.
No, and in
he
terms
bought a company that had invented that car, basically.
like, I know he.
Same with the Neuralink.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's no way that Musk actually knows what Neuralink.
He's not in the lab with a pen and a pad trying to get the damn label off. He's not doing that.
The only thing that Elon Musk has materially done in recent history is ruin Grimes as an interesting.
I used to like her.
No longer a fan.
It's
too bad.
Yeah, I heard her last song and it was I couldn't get over the sense that she was singing about Elon Musk and it was disgusting.
Oh fuck! What did you know that explicitly the song, or was it just a song about love? And now
it was a song about love. Yeah.
God damn it. Yeah, that's actually a
Love is merely the recepting of one brain activity function to another brain activity function.
just really an abstract. Like if we're talking about Neuralink and Singularity and like linking up brains, like I don't want my brain linked up with Elon Musk's.
God, no.
You know what I mean? Like
Even just on the basic cootie level, like I don't want anything to do with it.
exactly. Don't touch me. Don't touch my brain, man. I don't want my brain touching your brain, man.
Well, I don't think he wants to touch your brain either because I
he
thought it was
doesn't.
telling. I think someone pointed out on our Discord like why he chose did someone ask why he chose pigs, and it's like, well, this is probably what Elon Musk thinks of his consumers.
Yeah, we're already hogs.
Fucking hogs.
Yeah. What?
Take this, you fucking hogs.
And then all the hogs come to his defense when there's ever like a reasonable criticism of like how he handles his business enterprise. There's that great meme of like Apu, R.I.P. Apu.
Yeah.
Also, we're a pro Apu podcast. I'm just gonna lay that out there. Diving in front of a bullet as well. We all know this. I'm gonna explain it horribly, but anyone who is curious can look it up.
Well, no. We'll finish the meme. It's Apu. Yeah, you finish the goddamn meme.
Explain the meme.
Okay, so it's a snake firing a gun at
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, student loans.
at someone else, and snake is labeled reasonable criticism of Elon Musk, and then Elon Musk is the other person, and then Apu is an internet dork diving in front of it.
Taking the bullet.
Yeah.
For Elon. Well, we're talking about Hegel and the Wired Brain today, which is Žižek's newest. It's his newest book,
It came out like a month or two ago.
hot off the
Very new.
goddamn
Yeah.
press. Yeah. So Hegel and a Wired Brain, which involves
It's the most recent firing out of the t-shirt
out
cannon.
of the T-shirt cannon of his intervention. Yeah.
T-shirt. Fire! Ooh, a bobby pin. Mod?
Yeah.
At the Maud Flanders of our readership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we just turn this into a Simpson reference.
Once you start. Yeah, Hegel and a Wired Brain, which involves kind of applying Hegel to the hypermodern concepts, the post-human concepts of Neuralink and Singularity.
Yeah, and we found out this week that it was not the book is not such an untimely meditation because just on when was that? It was
September 1st, I believe.
September 1st. Headline: Neuralink. Elon Musk unveils pig. He claims. Sorry.
You can't even say it.
Elon. That's the headline. Elon Musk unveils pig. He claims has computer implant in it. I love how the slight diminutive tone of the
He
headline.
claims.
He claims.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. How the fuck do we know whether this pig has a fucking chip in its brain? It's just a pig.
He also described the article also describes that he says that it's a happy and healthy pig. I don't know how you discern whether or not a pig is healthy. He's happy rather.
He's throwing the PETA people like a bone here. Like on some, he's like, it's okay that I put this chip in this hog because it's happy and healthy. And in fact, it's probably now self-conscious about its happy and healthiness. It now knows. The process of putting in the chip in this pig makes it something other than a pig. No.
Right. It doesn't because the pig doesn't. I mean, forgive me, but the pig doesn't have any kind of conscious activity. The pig doesn't know it's a pig.
I think it's a post pig. That's my stance.
Post pig. I had this. So what I finally figured out an analogy that I wanted to use for the way in which Žižek reads Hegel. Is that for Žižek, Hegel is like the auto mechanic or plumber who comes to fix your thing, like be it a toilet or your car, and he fixes the problem that it's being addressed. But then 2 weeks later, you realize there's like a way bigger, sort of more essential problem. And this is the dialectic of Hegel, the auto mechanic, is like, Žižek applies him to one thing to explain it, and then 2 weeks later you realize there's a much larger, sort of more.
Well, the example necessitate like smuggles in the entire system, and I think what he's doing with this book is he's not trying to say like what would Hegel. He's not trying to specifically say like, oh, what would Hegel think of Neuralink, but rather like how can we provide a Hegelian reading of Neuralink, and in that way, through the Hegelian reading, that's a way of actualizing Hegel today, and why Žižek thinks that he calls the thesis of his book that in some sense the 20th century was not Deleuzian but Marxian, and the 21st century will be Hegelian. And I think Hegelian in the sense of not only in kind of his philosophical school, but also in the Hegelian movement of, rather than it being this kind of like movement towards a specific goal, rather the how like failures of systems kind of leave us in this position of like it's not utopian but it's not negative,
right?
And like,
well, because I think that a traditional like liberal reading of Hegel would be like, teleologically speaking, this is the end of history. Neuralink singularity sort of signifies like we've entered the post-human, right? Whereas Žižek is using Hegel to sort of prove that, prove his understanding of Hegel, the anti-liberal understanding of Hegel, which is not a theory of continuity and teleology, but of one of failure. And he does that by short-circuiting with Hegel, this concept of, because it's not a book that just like completely admonishes or like forecloses the potentials of singularity and Neuralink, and like I think any technological relationship between our brain and other people's brains or a machine.
He's not simply
throwing
kind
it
of
out.
aghast at the notion.
Exactly. It's more like he's reading Singularity and Neuralink with Hegel to short circuit further an understanding of what it actually means, like what's at stake here in the human subject, which is really not just like a damning of Neuralink and Singularity. It's more like what is at stake in this claim of post-human end of history that a kind of traditional Hegelian reading would posit, this sort of teleological end of sorts.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can refer to Todd McGowan, right? Like the contradiction is absolute, and in some sense, the new world that a notion like the singularity presents us with, for Žižek, is not. It's in some way stripping back the more kind of like surface level antagonisms and contradictions, but can't overcome the fundamental one. And it's just actually in an analogous way in the way that he thinks with communism, it just brings us closer to the core contradiction of subjectivity.
Right. Not just the genuine fears that come with, like almost science fiction fears, right? That have been embedded in our culture for a long time.
I'm scared. I'm scared of it. I'm gonna say.
Yeah, this is maybe I'm jumping the gun. We'll sort of go back to the beginning, but I kept thinking, who gets to advertise in the singular world? Singularity brought to you by
Yeah, so
Coca-Cola.
while we do mention that it's not merely a kind of like dismissal of even the ability or possibility of this type of implanting of the mind with technology, but I mean he does go through quite a number of critiques of what, given the like technological limitations or possibilities aside, like suggesting that say it is the case, what does that mean for new possibilities of control? What does it mean for subjectivity and sexuality?
The unconscious.
And communication. Yeah, unconscious. Yeah, that's a really interesting one too.
Well, I think because ultimately all of those are different words for Žižek of like the constitutive failure. The subject is this absolute point of negativity. And we're not even talking at this point. Singularity actually introduces a plane of subjectivity that's proper to Žižek's thought, which is not an individual, not a self with like a rich inner world. We're talking about the naked cogito, and Singularity actually provides us that framework. So it's kind of neat how this even like when you pick up this book, you think it's going to be a critique or rather, it is a critique, but you think that it's going to be like a strict criticism of it, but it actually allows Žižek to further formulate.
It's not like essay concerning the essence of technology. He's not pulling a Heidegger right now.
Yikes! Yeah. Well, we should probably go over what Singularity and Neuralink actually mean, because I don't know what they necessarily mean. I mean, Žižek's book isn't really also an explanation of what Singularity or Neuralink is, because that's not his task.
Well, in a way, it's not his task. In a way, like it might appear a bit of a cop out, but you can't really say what Singularity is, because it can only be, it's like undefinable under the current paradigm of like this is the before, and then once it does occur, which is simply the way he defines it, Singularity is the raising of like one's individual subjectivity into a kind of universal linked human/technological mind.
Consciousness.
Yeah. Maybe I can find a simple quote that lays it out in a bit clearer way than that.
Well, there's I think the idea is that it's mediated by a certain technology that individual subjects, atomized subjects, would join in a universal mind, right? Through a piece of technology. Then there's also the concept of Neuralink, which is
that's the brand name.
That's the brand name.
Of Elon
that's
Musk's.
Elon, exactly. Yeah.
But
like, what's the
and wirebrain is a way of kind of referring to, like, Singularity is kind of like almost the sort of rapture version of what will happen with the wirebrain.
Right. Okay.
And he says, maybe we can get into this discussion later, but he says, I'm blanking on the guy's name.
Kurzweil?
Yeah, that's it. Who uses perspicuously the analogy of the fall from the Garden of Eden. So sort of reinstating us to a point before the fall.
Pre-fall. Yeah.
So I have a quote that kind of succinctly sums up the way Žižek is approaching the concept of singularity. Back to singularity. This is the quote here. Back to singularity. It comprises the same three dimensions. It offers a new account of humanity and its passage into post-humanity, even with a new theological dimension. It promises a new subjective experience of being immersed in a space of collective mind. But the aspect that is regularly neglected, singularity will also imply a vast network of machines embedded in our social relations of domination.
There's also separate from singularity, there's this like part of an implied outcome of Neuralink is being able to control things with your mind, right?
Yeah.
So you want the coffee, you want coffee, you think that you want coffee, and the coffee machine turns on.
Coffee without cream.
Air conditioning.
Exactly.
You want sexual experiences, all that sort of thing.
He sort of insists upon the sexual in this book, which is great because it seems to be one of those things that equating sexuality as a constitutive failure of the human subject. He thinks that it's one of the things at stake. One of the examples he continues to bring up is like bypassing the whole courtship, which is like, if I think I want to have sex with you and you think you want to have sex with me, that will be communicated immediately in the singular world between our two minds. There'll be no need for language, which is also a very crucial point, right? Is that
the example he says is the Hugh Grant paradox from Four Weddings and a Funeral, where Hugh Grant can never, in his charming British way, can never really say how he feels, and like that failure to say how he feels is kind of the sexual process itself.
In his inability to say and how he loves the other, it actually proves. Yeah. Hugh fucking Grant, everyone. Hugh Grant. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we can start here. But maybe just one more brief note is that we've kind of talked about before that Žižek writes a few different types of books. There's kind of like theoretical type, Less Than Nothing, for example. Then there's the lighter ones. Recently left it there not speak its name, or left it there speak its name rather. And I was kind of thinking this
Great
maybe,
Freudian
Yeah,
slip.
great
Yeah.
parapraxis. Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's the whole point, right? But this one was actually kind of an interesting example of both. It's quite theoretical, but it's a classic kind of like bringing it down to the level of concrete cultural example that he's so well known for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's actually it can be a difficult book at times.
Yeah.
This one it was a difficult read at times, but also I think when it's deeply theoretical, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But it was an excellent book. I liked it. I actually think that it's his best of the most. I mean, I haven't read Sex and the Failed Absolute, so
Sex and the Failed Absolute, Jacob, is his best book that I've read.
I know.
I'm willing to make the claim that it's probably his best book, but maybe we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
We will. Okay, yeah. So, where do we want to begin? We've already introduced what singularity is. I think that the point of this book is to, with Hegel, try to see what isn't included in the promise of singularity, right? That's like, to me,
Yeah.
really, like, what is not included or what can't be reduced? What is the excess still?
Because it's either presented as a kind of utopian project that we're kind of inevitably moving towards, which is a bit ironic. Like in some sense, Elon Musk is saying that Neuralink is like kind of a precaution against the oncoming totality of AI, and like if we're gonna preserve like any sort of semblance of what humanity is, we need to intertwine our minds with technology so that we can avoid becoming what he calls animals in a zoo.
It's the Erdelin men, where their saving power, where the danger is the saving power, right? It's the same fucking thing.
And then another dimension of it is the potential for it to be like an entirely new, untapped reservoir for capital.
Mm-hmm.
Which is clearly what Elon Musk is thinking.
Well, we won't know yet, but we'll figure out what Elon Musk is thinking.
It's the highest. It's the highest example of what you might call a captured market or a captive market.
There's also this really interesting implication of like what do we mean? What do we mean by post-human? And why is it such an underscored concept with singularity? Is that we would be entering into a theoretical space that would be without humanity, without the failures of humanity. I mean, I think of it as this pre-mirror stage sort of like at least conceptual space in which we don't have to translate our desire through the symbolic order, right? Is that there's no...
Well, it's significant that Elon Musk even used the example of language, right? Like he says that language, the use of language will disappear, and we might keep it as some kind of a nostalgic thing for a few years. He literally said this.
Yeah.
But language would disappear. But from a Lacanian perspective, I mean, language is like, there is no outside of language, right? There is no outside of the symbolic. So thinking in terms of the implications of what the human... I mean, I'm pretty skeptical of that as a possible outcome, but let's just entertain it for a second.
Yeah.
Like, considering what might be the existence of the human outside of the use and necessity of language. I mean, then you're getting into a territory which seems distinctly, to use the phrase, post-human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That, and there's, I mean, Žižek spends a lot of time in the book kind of taking apart the covert religious underpinning to the notion of the singularity and post-human.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, the idea that in this other time, after, like, when we become, like, perfected, we will kind of attain a higher state of realization, and it also depends on the like also the religious notion that there's something deeply flawed with us as like physical human biological beings.
Yes. Yeah, and to return to this pre-fall, this is why the language of Eden is employed by Kurzweil, the guy, one of the main thinkers of Singularity, is to return to this sort of pre-fall, which as Žižek explains in the book, the fall is the constitutive moment of humanity, right?
It's what Hegel designated as like the space of freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the fall is the moment of humanity.
Right. It's also not to be understood as a kind of event in which there's there's the pre-fall and then the fall occurs, and then after that, it's like, no, the very fall itself is the instantiation of what is of humanity, right? Of
and we're trying to get back. Like in this post-human dimension, we're trying to get back to our pre-fall perfection, and by moving towards this singularity.
Yeah, and the belief of a lot of posthumanists is that humans are essentially frail, or you could say essentially sinful creatures, and technology grants the ability to finally overcome our incapacities and our original sins, right?
Our Promethean shame.
Well, that to me is it's the existential responsibility that comes with the things that are deemed in the wake of the fall are failures, right? Is that Adam and Eve see each other as naked for the first time, right? There's the concept of sexuality that emerges post-fall, and then there's also the responsibility for your actions that right? And I think the concept of a singularity that returns us to a pre-fall situation is like, can we eschew existential responsibility in singularity? Like, which is to say, can we get rid of the unconscious? I think is the reflexivity of the unconscious, which we should talk about at some point. Is that the sort of like, can we get to a point in which there is no reflexivity of the subject?
Well, that would be an implication of singularity.
Exactly.
Right? There would no longer be reflexivity, because reflexivity implies a gap.
Right.
Reflexivity is the return, in the Hegelian sense. Self-consciousness is the return of the subject to itself. It's the mind's ability to relate to itself. So that implies a distance there. And if there's no distance, then there's no reflexivity. For one thing, there's no inner life. But I think on a more fundamental level, there's no understanding of the human in any way that we've ever comprehended it or lived it. Which, like, there is a sense in which Žižek's notion of subjectivity definitely lies outside of that also.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thing we have to grapple with the notion of singularity is that it represents like a total endpoint in everything that we deem valuable and meaningful and not only that, sexuality, Jake, as you were saying, desire,
it's
itself.
It's a interesting reversal and a kind of true instantiation of the end of history, right? Because because history is that kind of embodied movement of failure of human beings in relations to the material world. I mean, you can be as Marxist as you want about it, but in any case, like the singularity is a point at which we leave that dimension of being human behind.
Right, and the dimension of Marx is interesting because I've never heard it put in this way, but I think it makes perfect sense that Žižek calls singularity post-human capitalism. And I think, Jake, as you were saying before, there's a dimension to this which can't be ignored, is that this is sustained by a vast network of capital and material technology and digital interfaces and the World Wide Web, I'm told it's called.
Yeah.
Let's get to the critique here.
Well,
maybe.
yeah. Well, I know. I mean, really, but I keep thinking about, like, just before we get back maybe to the nitty-gritty critique, or like maybe sort of structure this, is I kept actually thinking about the implications of singularity. Like, can I imagine them personally? Can you do the thought experiment of what singularity might feel like? And it's like, can I exist in a place in which I'm maybe not only just not responsible for my desire, but there just no longer is desire? Imagine a capitalism that mediated your subjective experience to such a degree that, okay, You order on Amazon 3 of the Harry Potter books. They've got the 4th one waiting for you before you've ordered it, right? So make that the analogy to Singularity. It's like, what if there's just a state in which I no longer have to desire, it does my desiring for me. And
well, actually, this is the use of the example. I mean, the ever fertile example of the Matrix.
Yes,
an aspect to the Matrix that Žižek points out in the book that I've never heard anyone else talk about is that why does the Matrix function off of humans at all? Why are humans batteries? I mean, we're told in the movie that humans batteries, but he makes the claim that the Matrix functions off of the enjoyment or the jouissance of human beings.
Because surely there has to be another material that would be more fruitful for the Matrix as an energy source, right? This is what he claims. Why is it that? And so he structures it from a Marxist perspective, which is that the big other, that capitalism leeches off of there has to be some level of enjoyment in exploitation, right? And we see the people in the Matrix pods, right? Sort of when they're just lifelessly there as these batteries, and it's this. I mean, it's a situation without desire, right? It's this. They're basically coddled and kept alive, but to the point is there has to be some level in which we choose singularity, in which we choose. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not I would say
that we've already made this choice.
It's not, it's a choice that doesn't really involve a subjective choice, right? Because not only because it's the abolition of the subject in a certain sense, or at least the individual, but because it's like a horizon, and it's not like say a laborer on a toiling on a field in England had any positive affirmation when they discovered the new world, right? And this is the new world. This is an opening up of a whole other dimension that will fundamentally alter everything about everyone's lives. But it's not really about choosing it.
Right. Okay.
If there's one other religious reference that Singularity reminds me of is the concept of enlightenment in Buddhism. And if it weren't for the techno aspect of it, or the technological aspect of it, it sounds pretty much exactly like the Buddhist concept of enlightenment. The disappearance of desire and of the ego,
and of suffering,
and
the self,
and of suffering and of self,
which Žižek claims is sort of what makes us human.
And what makes for him, we can get. I'm looking forward to this discussion, about Buddhism, but what he thinks makes Buddhism the ideal form of subjectivity under capitalism, and I think that brings us to the kind of core of his critique in terms of how capitalism, this role of subjectivity is the ideal form under capitalism, and why the potential for it, I mean, is not automatically bad, but certainly veers towards the apocalyptic in terms of I mean, there's that recent book that came out that he references actually quite a bit in one of his chapters, is the surveillance capitalism, and how as subjects presently, our surveillance is productively incorporated into capitalism.
Yeah, our unfreedom is experienced as freedom. Okay, almost I feel like we're gonna what we'll do is we'll stop and then we'll go back to and then we'll do a critique. This is great, guys. I'm loving this.
If anyone criticizes the non-linear qualities, hey, we're just being Hegelian, David.
Yeah. And I'm so hungover. That's basically that's it. But the non-choice of singularity, right? That this sort of what do I want to call it? The blackmail at hand here is when an app on your phone that you've recently downloaded this new app that's gonna fucking fix everything and fix your ED and make your dick bigger and finally but anyway you download the app.
Penis enlargers are my bag, baby.
This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby.
One book, Swedish-made penis enlarger pumps and me. This sort of thing is my bag.
baby.
Whatever the app may be, it asks you, do you mind if, or would you like to share your location, or can we use your location when you're using this, whatever? And it gives you the fallacy of the question, like, yo, our devices are already doing that, but it asks us despite, which I think is so fucking hilarious, and is ultimately at hand here in the singularity thing. And Žižek poses this question a few times, like, when would we know? When would we know that we've already agreed? You know?
No, it's a good point, Jake.
When you're in Europe, they recently changed the rules in terms of, like, when you go to a website, it asks you to approve the surveillance that they're doing on you. But I thought initially, like, hey, that's kind of, it's good. You get to either, like, agree or not agree. But it's like they're not actually asking. They're not actually asking for your agreement, because it's like they're asking you to actively participate in your own subjugation.
Some websites don't just say accept or decline. The accept button says, like, something like, yeah, that sounds good. Or like, yes, please. It's like
subjugation. Yes, please.
Exactly. It's enjoy your symptom. Like, incredibly, it's so much that it's there's no, and then it's like, yes, please, sure, yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so a perfect quote. Sorry, a perfect quote from the book here is Žižek says, "We, the watched, are not just material. We are also exploited, involved in an unequal exchange, which is why the term behavioral surplus, playing the role of surplus value, is fully justified here. When we are surfing, buying, watching TV, etc., we get what we want, but we give more. We lay ourselves bare. We make the details of our life and its habits transparent to the digital big other. The paradox is, of course, that we experience this unequal exchange, the activity which effectively enslaves us, as our highest exercise of freedom. What is more free than freely surfing the web? Just by exerting this freedom of ours, we generate the surplus appropriated by the digital big other, which collects data."
Bam. You are the product, and all of your activities are by, therefore the product that is, like, it becomes a further, like,
it's a capitalism, man. When you are
it's like a Pokeball,
It's Pokeball.
The the behavioral surplus linked in with the surplus value.
Yes.
Is such an interesting way of putting it, because like in a sense we are laboring in our free time when we use, like, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Like, that's the labor involved in the product that they're creating, which is data.
Yeah.
When I read that, it was like, it was like lightning striking.
Yeah, it's a new surplus.
As Marx said, he has a great Marx quote in here. It's a bit lengthy, but I'll just read the end. It's under the form of money that value begins and ends, and begins again, every act of its own spontaneous generation. This idea of, like, spontaneous generation of capital. Yeah. Like, there's not really a beginning point, because all of your behaviors online to an extent are determined by the interface already.
Yeah, it's kind of a tautology.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so to go to at the beginning of the book, so maybe we'll sort of, like, march our way through the critique a little bit here. Is at the beginning of the book, Žižek calls communism a cosmic event. He says communism is the only means to overcome the endless time of reproduction, and he describes time for us, our historical experience is constitutively of this loss, lack of suffering, of striving, right? And he then says, well, we need to return to Lacan and Hegel and return to philosophy to ask the question of the real. Why is the detour necessary of the illusion, right? Of the symbolic, of the imaginary realm? And this is back to the problem of the matrix. It's like, why is it human beings that are the batteries? And so why is humanity or subjectivity, why is it necessary that it involves the symbolic realm? Why can't we just immerse ourselves in the real? And I think this is a really important question, at least for me, when I was trying to personally imagine what singularity might feel like. It's sort of like, wait, can I get rid of the illusion, the necessary illusion, the fantasy? Can I exist in a space where the detour, the death drive, basically, is gone? And, like, so what ultimately, it's interesting that he puts communism as this cosmic event that kind of can be superimposed with Singularity. Like Singularity can do the same
they
thing. Exactly.
Yeah, they share some similarities, like also in terms of the altering of what subjectivity would be, given that our responsibility, or sorry, our subjectivity currently is like the neoliberal individual subject. So like it's an alteration, but I think what makes it different, and actually he also spends quite a bit of time linking tech utopianism to a long history within Soviet communism itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But this
well, because the Soviets in the 20s had this idea of the new man, and it was very much an idea of like a technological overcoming of man and a raising of men in general to a higher status collectively.
The Russian writer Platonov is his example there, but Platonov himself has near the end of his life a kind of distancing of that idea of like the utopian, like more than human subject, right?
I do remember there's like some Ilya something, whatever, this scientist in the Soviet 20s that like tries to like mate like orangutans and people from the Congo.
Yeah, for labor, perfect labor.
For the perfect laborer / soldier. And then I love, like, in parentheses, Žižek says, when they discovered that like this wasn't going to work, he was quickly liquidated. It's like they actually backed a trip to the Congo. The Soviets, like they like financed a trip to the Congo to help maybe develop this guy's science, and then it's like, oh, this guy's a quack, liquidated.
See, what they would have done to a Nazi doctor, after the fact is they would have hired him to the CIA.
Yeah, well, he does say, man, that Žižek says, like, okay, fine, we're getting like media wind of Musk putting a chip in a pig now, but he's like, you can guarantee that like the CIA is not only chomping at the bit for this technology, but probably way ahead of just putting it in a fucking pig's brain.
Yeah. They're already flying that pig in a stealth jet or something.
Yeah. They've already shot that pig to the moon. But
they're already putting fluoride in our water and instituting 5G technologies around the world.
It reeks of conspiracy theory, but anyway.
It does, yeah, but
yeah. I think it's an important thought anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean like that whole dimension of like what are we? I mean, and this is slightly to return, but yeah, like what are we giving to these people when we amalgamate ourselves, freely or not, into these systems? And but beyond that, it's like, what does it even do to our very sense of ourselves? And maybe we can enter this part of the discussion, because like, as enjoyable as this is, we're already 15 minutes in. But like,
no, but we just keep saying we're gonna go back to the beginning. We're gonna go back to the beginning. We're gonna go.
Wait, what the hell? What the fuck? We're 50 minutes in. What the fuck? I feel like we just started.
I know.
Yeah.
I felt the same way too. I know. I'm like, I want to make another coffee.
Oh, look, this is going great, man. We're like, we got so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Maybe this is making me think that maybe we should maybe this can be kind of like a first brush with this book.
Part 1, yeah.
I think there should be multiple episodes. There's so much to talk about.
I agree.
I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, ooh, we could. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. This is like an
so
intro.
maybe let's tie it up with like, the end of an introduction in terms of like our impressions, and then like this type of like utopianism and like the like apocalyptic potentials of what's going on here. The immediate. I mean, I thought the idea that language will be abolished in 5 years to be fucking hilarious, but I don't know what
no, but the arbitrary in 5 years, like, wait, what? And also, the deep irony is like, well, this is a thought that's of course linguistic, right? Like this. I mean, the whole project of Singularity is a human project, and
it's like,
do
hey, bro,
do you think Singularity is a kind of fantasy of a meta language? Like, how Lacan says there is no meta language.
Oh,
this kind of fetish of a meta language that.
You know what?
Will, nice. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. And what is that but God, in a certain sense, right? Like the kind of pre-language, it's the unmoved mover, say, of language. And like Žižek does talk about why he's a Christian atheist in this book, which I think also bears a fuller discussion. But in terms of like the theism here is quite apparent, but
Mm-hmm.
in the way Žižek's interpretation of like what makes him and like Bidu like Christian atheists is that image of like, let's say language doesn't have like it's not like God is non-linguistic, but it's like God is the kind of like permeation of language in a certain sense, which has no like underpinning.
See, I would say meaning without language.
Yeah, sure.
Which
Yeah.
which is like, I think that the meta language, if I understand it correctly, it's like where just a really boiled down version is like you can say what you mean, like that you know, or no Will, what is it?
Meta language is the idea that you can speak from a neutral point about the symbolic without engaging in the pitfalls of the symbolic.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
but it's impossible.
I think
There's always a place-
it pertains to the same problem with object-oriented ontology, right? Like you're
Exactly,
always
yeah.
embedded
Exactly.
in the symbolic order that you're describing.
well, so because what Singularity promises is to liquidate the gap, the constituent.
Yeah, and
gap.
also the place, you know.
Yeah. But this is why, you know, God. It's like Peter. This is why the theistic element is actually quite relevant, is because, you know, God and Jesus. You know, he brings in this example of God actually separating from, you know, even within himself, right?
Mm.
And Jesus has this moment on the cross where, you know, God, why have you forsaken me? This is a purely human element to theism, right? And the promise of Singularity is to return to a time before that splitting off, before the necessity of a human God, before the necessity of Christ. And I wonder if all of that, like what the meta language, Will, which is such a fucking awesome point, if it relates
That's a good point there.
if it relates to like a concept of theism without the fall, capitalism without desire
Antagonism,
and antagonism, right?
Yeah,
It's like this smooth, like, as I think of
Being without contradiction.
exactly, I think of this of singular. If when I try to imagine the singular, I just think of this, like, I don't know, smooth.
Smooth is exactly the word I was thinking.
Because what the
of, yeah.
fuck is actually smooth? You know, just totally smooth,
Frictionless.
frictionless.
You
Yes,
know?
exactly. Yeah, the KY jelly of I don't know. I thought lube was a moment.
It's
there.
like
Well, it's like lube without the sex, right?
Coffee without cream, lube without.
Yeah, I mean, we've like I feel like we've kind of dipped a toe in, tested the waters, raised some questions, and not really provided too much of the answers or interpretations or
yeah.
interventions that Žižek provides.
I think this is a great introduction, like where we're at now, Jake. Like we kind of just did it.
Yeah.
And found that this book is actually like quite a fruitful intervention.
I like I said, I haven't read Sex in the Field Absolute, but I was like, oh, this is it. This is Žižek at his finest.
He was having so much
yeah.
fun when he was writing this too. You can tell.
I also
And Žižek is not one for self-praise, but in a couple of interviews I've heard where he's talking about this book, he says, you know, like he'll say something like, you know, if there's one thing I appreciate about this book, it's X, you know, like it's pretty rare, but he says
he has thoughts about the book. He also says what I was trying to do in the book, which to me signals that there was intervention intention, which that's such a fucking lame phrase,
well, it's not. He writes like compulsively. But
yeah,
there's clearly, it's like often his writing is about the act of writing itself, but this one seems like very directed and like he was trying to make a very specific intervention.
Also, just stylistically, or maybe
do you want to talk about that?
Formally, the book it's very interesting the way the book is set up, right? Because he has a short introduction, and then he's got what is it, 6 essays, and then he's got a long thesis of what does he call it? A treatise on the digital apocalypse. It's just a very interesting way to set up a book. I mean, like, I don't really have anything to say about it other than that. It's like he put effort into the way the book was set up, which doesn't seem classically Žižekian, because usually I think he just kind of psychs himself into typing for as long as he can,
Yeah.
and a book comes out of it. But there was something very precise in
Yeah.
the way that he set up the book.
I
think
also
it's pretty
thought
interesting.
making it a pop-up book was quite interesting.
Well, no, but he gets
The book actually has a glory hole in the back.
he gets his structure from a novel.
A novel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to the wasn't it the Beckett novel?
No,
Or is that a different one?
No, he gets it
No.
from it's a Russian.
See, okay, but this brings us, I think, yet to discuss in talking about this book. We have to talk about. I mean, we really have to talk about subjectivity more.
Yeah.
The unconscious. We have to talk about the political implications of this. We have to talk about capitalism.
Wait.
We have to talk about his literary references, specifically Samuel Beckett, his book The Unnamed in the trilogy.
He also mentions this Eisenstein film. I actually watched it and it's incredible.
Hmm.
Would recommend to a friend.
Well, maybe we should just take the moment to say goodbye for the episode, and with the promise that we're gonna be discussing a lot more of this book very soon.
And so on and so on. And so on and so on. And so on and so on.